Hi, thanks for listening. This is the We Help Business podcast. We're so glad that you stopped back in to listen to another, hopefully very helpful episode. So today we're going to talk about being disruptive and how the Super Bowl was actually disruptive. What I mean by that is okay, we just had the Super Bowl, so everybody's talking about Super Bowl commercials. I don't know what your favorites were. Some of ours were, at least in my household, was the puppy dog robot. We loved that one. We loved the Pringles can on someone's hand. We also really enjoyed the Push It for Doritos, Flaming Hot or whatever it was. We enjoyed those commercials, and they were good. But the one that really stood out to me that was fascinatingly crazy was a little block QR code that just bounced around a screen. Very reminiscent of a gag in the TV show The Office, if you remember that. Theirs was like a DVD screensaver or something. It's very reminiscent of that. And it stood out because it was so simple, so different. And then we saw the QR code and many of us, like me included, went to scan it to see what it was. And when you did, you realized it was for a link to Coinbase, where you could either sign up and get $15 if you didn't have an account, or if you did have an account, you'd be eligible to win $1 million. So a Super Bowl commercial in that window cost about $7 million to buy the airtime. Now that spot looked pretty easy to create, or commercial. Sometimes we call them spots. That commercial looked pretty easy to generate. So it's something like $5,000, let's say, on the high end. So they spent $7,005,000 to put a commercial on TV. And the question you have to ask is it memorable? Did it disrupt? Did it do anything? And here's what's fun about it. So first off, it stood out because it didn't look like any other TV spot. They didn't spend a bunch of money on crazy actors or endorsements. It just existed the way it was, a little square with music bouncing around a screen. And it worked because people started talking about it. Some started talking about the Office reference. Some started talking about how they hated it. Others just were like, I didn't know what it was. And they felt compelled to scan it. So they went up compelled rather to scan it. So they'd walk up and they'd scan it. And so that, as soon as that scan hits, they can track that link got fired. Well, every time that happened, that gives them a kind of a measure of return on investment. So now that simple commercial for $7,005,000 is telling them how many people were actively looking at it, so they can see if it worked. And of course, then they have the bait to get you involved, which is sign up and get $15 for free to spend on crypto, which is kind of low right now. So it's a good idea. Or if you're already a member, you get entered into $1 million giveaway. Also great. I'm sure there's conditions to both of those, but it's fascinating to me that they use that metric to help do it. So they Coinbase broke through and disrupted the Super Bowl by creating an ad that wasn't necessarily memorable, but it wasn't easy to forget either. So they created something where people saw this weird cube bouncing around the screen. Now, did it eliminate certain demographic? Sure. My dad had no idea what was going on. He is retired. He is in his 70s. My mom, no idea either. All of my friends and younger, and I'm in my 40s, let's say, we all loved it. We all thought it was great, or we were all intrigued by it, I should say. I shouldn't say love it. We all were intrigued by it. So there's something to be said about being disruptive. So if you're going to go out and spend any amount of money to put out your marketing efforts, just kind of consider this. You're going to spend money to create the content. We've talked about that before. You're going to have a marketing budget. Talked about that before. But more importantly, you need to make sure that you have a way of making it stand out. And that's what's really crazy about this particular piece. It stood out because the world is a sea of commercials, and you need to make sure that people see yours, or the right people see yours. So it's just something to think about that I always take away from the Super Bowl. I enjoy the idea of what the Super Bowl game is. It's fun, but I enjoy the commercials because I always find it to set the mood going forward. As a commercial producer, as a creative director, it helps me know comedy is trending, different is trending. In this case, I would argue that abstract is a little bit more trending now than anything else, but that's a separate issue, maybe even a separate podcast. In this case, we just want to talk about being disruptive. If you're going to spend the money, make sure your content stands out. So if you want any help doing that, of course, this is the sales pitch part of it. You can always go to wehelp.business. That's right. wehelp.business instead of .com. And we'd be glad to sit down and talk to you and advise you and help you any way we can. If not us, find somebody else local to you or around you, but make sure that whatever content they create stands out, makes a difference, and is super awesome. As always, thanks for listening, and I look forward to talking to you next week. Have a great one.